The format for this meeting is an interview with an alcoholic, the hot seat, inside the alcoholic studio. A speaker will be asked a series of questions that range from their personal story, the steps, relationship with God, and carrying the message. There are no right answers, just a fun and interesting way to share the speaker's personal insight. Our speaker for tonight is Eric. Timekeeper, please allow 90 seconds per question. The meeting may run slightly longer. Members, please feel free to leave if needed. Speaker, please say done when you have finished your answers, or please say pass on the questions you prefer to skip. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's begin. Question 1. Please generally describe in your own words our basic text, the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
The basic text is, it's a blueprint for a new way of life. It's also it's a way to find faith. For me, that's what it was. It was a way to find a higher power and invite it into my life and make use of it in my life. That's it.
Are you an alcoholic, and if so, what personally makes you an alcoholic?
Yes, I am, Eric, and I am an alcoholic. The thing that makes me an alcoholic is, for many years, I didn't really know what an alcoholic was growing up. I wanted to define what alcoholic wasn't. But then in my 40s, at 40 years old, I began drinking without the off switch. Earlier in life, I had an off switch, and then as life went on, that off switch disappeared. And I was drinking against my will at the very end of it. That's it.
And what does the concept of anonymity mean to you?
Anonymity. Well, it's anonymity. I have anonymity when within my fellowship, with talking to others, not disclosing what they're doing or who is there to be seen. But the deeper meaning for anonymity for me is I like my services to remain anonymous. I don't like to talk about what I do within the program and stuff. Anonymity for me is the basis of humility. If we are anonymous about our works, we can easily remain humble, and then I stay out of self. So it's the cornerstone of my sobriety.
Please give us a brief sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit.
Oh, like I mentioned, I started drinking just like everybody else in the rooms. I started drinking as a early teen, and then it gradually picked up as I was going through high school. But also, as I mentioned, there were times when I could drink like a normal person. I'd go to a party to meet girls or whatever. I could drink regularly. But there were times that I drank and lost that control. I crashed a car at 17 and then a couple more in my early 20s. During that time, I did not have control at some times, but I did have control at other times. It escalated through my 30s, and it gradually got worse and worse until I was in my 40s. As I mentioned, I put my mind to stop drinking, and I couldn't. I couldn't just get from work to home, and I couldn't do those things without drinking. And then once I did drink, I couldn't stop. It was I'd spend my entirety of my day spinning out about how I was going to drink and hide it, or how I was not going to drink, until I eventually drank, and then that was the end of it. So, yeah.
Alcoholism is described in the book as a fatal illness. What does that mean to you?
Fatal illness. I don't really know how to address that. I suppose, I don't know, I think of fatal as being death, but the alcoholism, the level of alcoholism that I had, it wasn't killing me fast enough, to be quite honest with you. I suppose over time it would have, but at the end of my drinking, death wouldn't have been a bad thing for me. But I do believe that if we continue to drink, especially after we've found a solution for it, if we deliberately turn our back on God and our program, that there are fates worse than death. Quickly end up there.
What are the conditions of your mind and body that accompany your alcoholism?
The mind and body, my liver was failing right as I It was April. I got sober in 7/7/4, July 7th of 2014 is my current sobriety date. In April, I went in for my yearly physical at 40 years old, and my liver panel came back at 3 of the 5 fields that she showed me on her screen were red, and the other 2 were yellow, and my liver was failing. So that's what it was physically doing to me. Mentally, what it was doing to me, it's looping thoughts. I couldn't stop my mind from spinning away on every single thing that could possibly happen or that I could think of happening. The mental anguish that I was in was the reason that I drank. I mean, it was impossible. It was inconceivable for me to think about sleeping at night without being to the point of blackout. And then I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go about my day and I'd just ping off of everybody that I saw. It was difficult at best to deal with people. I feel that that's kind of the mental part of it. If you're talking about the mental obsession to drink, there was that constant thought running through the back of my mind of how I'm not going to drink or how I'm going to drink, but drink was always there. And I'd say that pretty much fits in with alcoholism.
In your understanding, what is the role of a sponsor?
The role of a sponsor is like a very one-on-one version of the group. So we come into Alcoholics Anonymous. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous because I knew guys that drank the way I drank, and they weren't drinking that way anymore. And on top of that, they were happy. So I came into Alcoholics Anonymous to find out what they were doing and how they were doing that. A sponsor is a very specialized one-on-one person who helps me do that, who helps me. I'm having a hard time with X, Y, or Z. They then take me through the book and they point out, well, if you do this, this might help with this situation. I'm restless, irritable, discontent. Well, let's do some inventory and focus on your resentments or focus on your fears. Now we've got this inventory in front of us. If these things just haven't gone away, let's see how we're going to get rid of them. We're going to introduce you to prayer. We're going to introduce you to meditation. We're going to introduce you to this book. And the coolest thing about it is if you have a sponsor who takes you through step 1, more about alcoholism, step 2, we agnostics, and takes you right through that book, chapter by chapter, piece by piece, you then have something to give to the next man. We've all got a little bit different story of sobriety, but the sponsor can take the dry cut version from the book, point it out to you, so you have something to then relay to the next alcoholic, which is invaluable. Yeah, he's a mentor.
How have your sponsorship needs changed from early sobriety until now?
They've changed drastically. My first sponsor, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I got my 30-day chip, and I must have said something really profound because at the break, he came up and he says, "You need a sponsor," and it was easy to say, yeah. At that point, I needed help with everything. I remember not even 30 days sober. I was sitting in my living room and I was looking out my front door, and somebody drove onto our property, and my reaction was to jump up out of my recliner and grab an axe handle and go out in the front yard and see what they wanted to do. And then I realized it was my new neighbors who had just moved in. So I had to call him and ask him how to handle that situation afterwards. And there was an amend in there, and that's just one example of early in sobriety, how a sponsor helped me. At about a year of sobriety, I got a new sponsor, and he was the one who really took me through the big book and showed me where each step within the big book is, where the promises are for each step. He really nailed out and parsed out what inventory is. My 4th step is not my 8th step. My 4th step is resentments, fears, sexual inventory, and harms to others. So he helped me encapsulate that. At 2 years of sobriety, I wasn't getting the results. I was still restless, irritable, and discontent. And he helped me build that God consciousness that I have today. So it was little bits in the beginning, and then as I grew in spirituality, the need changed for sponsorship.
Have you completed the 12 steps, and if so, what is your suggested time frame for completing the steps?
Yeah, I've gone through Every time I sponsor somebody, every time I take somebody through the steps, I go through the steps as well. Every year on my sobriety birthday, I get a brand new big book, and I underline all new things with all new sponsees every single year. The timetable, when I'm working with somebody else, I've gone through the first 7 steps with somebody in a single day. I've gone through a step a week. It seems to be a very good chunk. It kind of gauges between cases. Some people need more time focused on one step. I think that the most important and most vital part of step work is understanding and implementing each step into their life. So if it takes somebody a longer time to understand that their life is unmanageable, then that is what it is. But a step a week, you read the chapter, I read the chapter, we get together, we go over it, and we do the written work together, is a pretty good guideline for me. And then 2 weeks for a 4th step if necessary. But again, each case is different.
In your own words, please describe steps 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3, in my previous interactions with Alcoholics Anonymous, it was an easy way to just say, yes, 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 I'm doing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. There really wasn't much weight to it. And then, as I'd mentioned earlier, that 4th step was actually more of an 8th step in my prior experiences. When I got into Alcoholics Anonymous at this point in time, that sponsor that I had, it was beautiful because he really didn't push me into a direction of his idea of a God, of a higher power. He really broke out each step. Okay, step 1, I'm powerless over alcohol. That was clear as day. The second part of it was much more important. My life is unmanageable, and I lack the power to manage it. Step 2 was came to believe that a power greater than myself. That was evident in talking to the other men and women in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was working for them. Everybody who had what I wanted freely expressed that spirituality portion of their program. And then step 3 has been it's changed almost as much as my needs for a sponsorship go. I remember being 2 years, year and a half, 2 years sober, and the gravity, I was doing a 3rd step prayer with a sponsee at West Slope Fellowship, and bondage of self, the weight and depth of the words bondage of self came into play, and it really meant something to me at that point. The last part of that 3rd step prayer recently, take away my difficulties so that I may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. That doesn't ask me, I'm not praying for my higher power to give me an easy life. I'm praying for whatever you may call it, to give me the tools to deal with these things so I'm going to grow through these difficulties. The difficulties are going to be inevitable. I'm going to grow through these things and then carry that message to other people who also have those difficulties. The solution being higher power in 1, 2, and 3.
Hey, what does your unmanageability and self-will look like?
What does it look like? Oh, man. It looks like chaos. Unmanageability is, and that's another one of those word plays that they get into, and I was reading that, and I'm like, my life is unmanageable. I can manage my life just fine. The way I look at that now and the way I explain that to people I work with is frustration. Do you have areas of your life that are frustrating to you? If you have areas of life that are frustrating to you, those are unmanageable areas of your life. You cannot do it. You lack the power to do those things. And then I quickly run out of options. Eric is the only option when I'm caught up in self. And I quickly run out of those options, and then that's what leads me to drink. That cycling thoughts, the never being able to shut that thing down, that's what the unmanageability and the chaos of life is without a higher power.
What is your concept of power greater than yourself, and how are you turning your will and your life over to it?
I love that question. That's it. That has also changed all throughout sobriety. In the beginning, it was love. That was it. My daughters, I was like 9 months sober, and they put this little card or brown paper bag cover on my big book, and they drew a big heart on the front of it, and love, and then they wrote all of our the principles all around it. And love was the first thing that I really truly grasped onto. That was my concept of a higher power. Then as I was getting through inventory, I really had this one situation keep popping up in my life, and clearly it was causing me to be restless, irritable, and discontent. And I'd pray about it for a while. I'd pray for this person's happiness, just out of a general idea of it. And it would be good for a while, and then it would come back again. I forgot where I was going with that. What was the question?
Your concept of power greater than yourself.
Concept of power greater. So at one point in time, I got together with that second sponsor. This was about 2 years. And he says, what does that passage there say when we deal with resentments? It doesn't say pray for the person to be happy. It says specifically pray how I can be of use to this person. And when I started praying that from my heart and asking how I could be of service to this person, that was another level of my connection with my higher power. My wife it was my mother-in-law, and my wife at that point in time says, you're hanging out with all these ne'er-do-wells and people who are getting out of prison and going into these jails, and you have all this empathy and compassion for these people who are inconsequential in your life. Why can't you have this same compassion for my mom? And it was just, I couldn't. I just clearly could not do that. I had to go to a higher power to find that compassion for that woman. And that's where I lie on it now. It helps me get through the day finding compassion where I can't find it.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 4 and 5.
Steps 4 and 5. Inventory. I loved inventory. I really, truly did. Once I got the idea behind the inventory, it was like digging into my brain almost. Why am I doing this? It was giving me the whys behind my, the method behind my madness. And it was something for me until I really had that firm spiritual connection. It was busy work. It was something that I could get an idea. I've got something spinning around in my head. I could drop it on paper. Sometimes this is a delusion. It's not even a real thing. And instantly when it hits that paper, it goes away. But the times that it hits that paper and it's actual and it's real, I then take that to a sponsor and we find these pieces, these defects in my character. You do enough of this inventory and you start to see these patterns develop. I hear these spiritual awakenings that were a bang. I hear people dropping a 30-page inventory the first time they did inventory. That was not me. It took me a much longer time to grow into this, but I did no less than 15 inventories in the first year of sobriety. It was a way for me to really dive into the program and develop honesty with myself, really. The fifth step is going over that with that sponsor. And also, that's part of that delusion method. When I put something on paper, I may still be rationalizing and justifying it in my mind. But as soon as I take that to another person, number one, it's a humbling situation. Number two, it's helping them stay sober. And number three, they can also find the delusions that I still can't find sometimes. And that's the basis for 4 and 5 for me.
What does the exact nature of our wrongs mean to you?
The exact nature of our wrongs. I suppose it's... The exact nature of my wrongs... I don't know, that's a good question. The nature of them comes out from the investigation of them. I suppose as soon as I put it down on paper and I take that to the other man and we're talking about them, we're finding the pattern. The lie, manipulate, intimidate. I mean, those are my 3 main defects of character. And you do enough inventory, you do find out the exact nature of those things. That's an interesting question. I'll have to think about that some more. Thanks.
Please briefly describe in your own words steps 6 and 7.
Never ending. I'm flawed and I have a program and Alcoholics Anonymous has shown me a way to live a stable life. I've found serenity in life and I've found acceptance of my humanness, really. 6 and 7 is me saying, I am a human, I need God to help me with these human things that I have, the ways that I approach my life with. it also keeps me constantly knowing that I'll never be a saint. And I distinctly remember early in sobriety looking up what it takes to be a saint. And because we are not saints, we read it in How It Works all the time. It was something early in sobriety. I was still very sick, and that was something that I'll prove them wrong. And then I accepted like I said, I accepted my humanness as something that's just the nature of being human. But I try. And that's what 6 and 7 means to me, is on a daily basis, there's something out there for me to work on. Yeah.
What are some of your character defects, and are they being removed?
Oh, yeah, they are. The way I say that they're being removed is I don't not ever think about lying, or I don't not ever think about stealing. Pretty much the only thing I don't ever think about is drinking anymore. But I do know that at the end of the day, when I do my review of my day, I don't have to go back and make those amends. I do know that I'm not filled with self, and I'm not motivated by those things. Earlier in sobriety, it was like, I remember a specific incident. I went down, got a load of wood, and I brought this wood home. I stacked it up, and then I deliberately left my truck parked there so that when the wife and kids got home, they'd say, "Oh, Dad got a load of firewood." And that was just a manifestation of self. I needed that approval, that seeking. I would go about the house and do things all day long, expecting a certain level of gratitude from my wife. And then that wouldn't happen, and I would instantly become resentful. Those things don't happen on a daily basis, but I distinctly remember those things happening earlier in sobriety. So that, to me, leads me to believe that God has removed those defects of character from me. I don't go through life, my three main, like I said, lie, manipulate, and intimidate. Those are gone, and I don't rely on those anymore. So, yeah.
Please briefly describe steps 8 and 9.
Steps 8 and 9. Step 8, I think a lot of people, early in my... between 20 and 40 years old, I had in and out interactions with Alcoholics Anonymous. And the times that I did, and I did do some step work, I looked and was instructed that step 8 was more of the inventory. And I know we derive 8 from the inventory that we take, but it's the list of actual amends that we need to make to people. And becoming willing to make those amends. Even the things that aren't on my list, I need to become willing to make amends for as they pop up. I may very well see somebody from my past that I need to mend a relationship with that was not on my list. Part of that 8th step is to become willing at that time, whatever something pops up, to be able to mend that relationship. And then step 9 is doing it. It's the actual doing of the amends. And that was really... I had some tremendous experience. I had a lot of financial amends to make. I was a thief. I stole from every business I ever worked for. And there was this one where we went down, and I was still scrapping for money again. It was early in sobriety, and I'd figured out that I owed this company, this local restaurant, $250. I grabbed $300 out of my account because I was going to have an extra $50 cash for the weekend. And I went and I prayed before I got there. And I walked up to the doorstep, and she was sweeping off the entryway. And I introduced myself. I said, "You may not remember me, but I was working at this pizza place." I guess I was 17. It was right before I ended up in rehab. So I said, "You may not remember me, but I used to steal booze from you and money out of the till. And I figured this out, and I want you to have this money." And I gave her this $300, and she started crying. And she said, "Eric, that's the most beautiful thing. I don't know what to say. We weren't even going to be able to make payroll tomorrow, and this couldn't have come at a better time." And it was like, whoa. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it again. It was a beautiful thing, and that was one of my first ones that I made. From there, it got easier. That was a real hard one doing that, and there were still some hard ones. But the 9th is definitely the making it happen. Become willing to make it happen, And then when it pops up, making it happen.
Why is it important for you to straighten out your past?
It's important for me to straighten out my past. Number one, so I'm not ashamed of it. So I'm not embarrassed by it. So it doesn't drag me down. The second thing is, what does it say? To fit ourselves to be of maximum service to other humans. Like that situation there. I don't know what I would have been able to do. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
Oh, why is it important for you to straighten out your past?
Straighten out my past. So the guilt that is on my shoulders from straightening out, if I don't straighten out my past, I've got this guilt. That's number one. Number two, I don't need to be embarrassed or ashamed about everything. I'm a human just like many other people. And it also gives me, with a lot of situations, I tell my story to another alcoholic, and now they're, wow, I did the same thing, and it opens up a doorway for us to recover together, I guess. Yeah.
When you were actively drinking, did you drink whiskey in your milk?
No, I've never drinking whiskey in my milk. Whiskey was my get down, but I have never put whiskey in milk.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 10 and 11.
Steps 10 and 11. I don't do a lot of written inventories at night. I do review my day. But step 10, continue to take personal inventory when we're wrong, properly admitted it. I do review my day. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 10 and 11.
Oh, steps 10. Continue to take personal inventory where we're wrong, promptly admitted it. That's the going through the day as I'm wrong, or if I'm getting tight, I need to pause. That's kind of what I think of as when I think of step 10 is my day-to-day activities, and when I do get snippy with somebody, I need to make those amends immediately. The written inventory at night, I never really did much of that, but I do review my day before my evening prayers. And then step 11 is my major part of my program. Every morning I wake up, and of course every morning means something to everybody differently, but I would say probably twice a month I may skip it. Something pops up. But every morning I get up and I sit. I do a little yoga just to get my back moving. And then I sit in silent meditation on my front porch. I was lucky enough to be introduced to one of our fellowships has a fairly significant Buddhist group within it. And I met up with a couple of them, and they took me down and showed me proper Buddhist meditation techniques, chanting, breathing, and it's been a really good part of my program. When I do that in the morning, it's easy to do, but it also allows me to do it more readily when the day gets hectic. I cleanse my mind, I go blank, and then I invite God in to move forward.
What does meditation mean to you, and how do you practice it?
Meditation can be a lot of things to a lot of different people. For myself personally, I like a silent meditation. I focus on my breath, my in-breath, my out-breath. If my mind is racing, I cheerfully greet it with a smile, those thoughts that are coming, and say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. We'll get to this a little bit later. Right now I'm spending a little time with God. And I try to dismiss those thoughts that come in that way, rather than, I'm doing this wrong. And it tends to set up a better pace in my meditation. And like I mentioned, I have meditation. I sit on a mat, on a cushion, on a very regular basis. It flows seeming smoothly from my meditation in the morning and I end it every time with that third step prayer, and then I go about my day.
Please briefly describe step 12.
Step 12 is Step 12, the easy part of step 12 is taking somebody through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. God puts willing people in my life. I don't need to go out and chase people down or anything. God just puts people in my life who I need to work with. The hard part about step 12 is that practicing these principles in all my affairs. It's difficult. I want to lie, manipulate, intimidate. I want to use my character defects the way I've lived 40 years of my life to deal with all of my affairs, whether that's work, my wife, my children, finances, everything. But when I take those things, and it is actually turning them over to God, when I invite him into my heart, into my mind, and do those things, not just AA in the room of Alcoholics Anonymous, but AA's program in all those areas of my life, life is smooth. I find serenity in those areas that I didn't normally have serenity in. And that was a learning process of being able to do that. Yeah, that's 12 step.
Can you share with us a spiritual experience you have had as the result of these steps?
Everything I do that I invite God into is a spiritual experience, right? You know, I have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And then I'm awakened. I'm alert, and I gain knowledge when I remember earlier, it was the first thing I was aware of is when I was lying. I remember I was telling a lie to my boss, and I stopped mid-sentence and I said, "This is not true." And he laughed. He laughed at me. But so we gain this spiritual awakening within us, and that gives me this awareness of these things. The spiritual experience for me, the way I interpret that, is whatever I do in my life that I invite God to experience it with me is a spiritual experience. I prayed in my truck before I came in here tonight that God is here with me right now. He's with all of us. So anything that I do, be it the grocery store, be it talking with my daughter, be it giving an evaluation. I gave an evaluation to one of my employees at work today. If I invite God into that normal, mundane experience now becomes a spiritual experience because God is there with us.
What is the message of AA, and why is it important to carry this message?
What is the message of AA? I think the message of AA is lack of power. That is our dilemma, right? It speaks to our first step. My life is unmanageable. I lack the power to manage my life. But Alcoholics Anonymous takes me and introduces me to this higher power. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, I love the big book. I really do. We can pass it on. It keeps the message clear and straightforward over, what are we looking at, 80 years, 90 years of usage with it, and it's still the same. And there's a beauty to that. But again, this book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I look at it like the blueprints of a spaceship. This book gave me the ability to build this beautiful spaceship that now I can go through the universe and experience all these things. I can go through life and experience a beautiful life because of the tools that I've learned at Alcoholics Anonymous. The end game is my connection with my higher power, not my connection with my big book. That higher power is what it's going to take me to. Now I live life, and every once in a while things get tweaked, and it's like, I ought to go back and reread that page 61 through 63 on selfishness and self-centeredness. Or I get tweaked and I need to go back and re-review 84 through 88, 83 through 88 if I'm talking about my family. And so I review back, go back to it to find those things. But I really feel that our basic text is just that. It's a basic text that shows us how to build this good human, if you will. And then I experience life with it after that.
What are some of the principles you are practicing in your affairs today?
Patience, love and tolerance. Love and tolerance, man. That's the best single grouping on in any area of the big book is that bottom of page 84 there, that love and tolerance of others is our code. And we've ceased fighting everything or everyone, including alcohol. For by this time sanity has returned. So that there's so much in there it tells me that if I'm fighting everything and everyone, I'm insane. And eventually I'm going to fight alcohol again. If I have love and tolerance for people, I am not insane. I, as some people like to call it, recovered. When I am practicing love and tolerance for my fellow humans, I am in God's will. There is no two ways about it. And the way that I know that my higher power is working in my life is because I lived a life, most of my life, based solely upon hate. Love and tolerance don't come easy to me. Judgment and justification come easy to me. And I have to have that higher power in my life to practice that love and tolerance, to find sanity. And that brings us back to our second step, that a power greater than myself is going to restore me to sanity. Yeah, that's it.
Why is it important to put the welfare of others ahead of your own?
Because I want to stay sober, number one. But number two, if I'm putting the welfare of others ahead of myself, it works out. It just works. Been doing this for 5 years now, and every time I do that, I do what I think God would have me do. It just works out. My happiness is contingent on helping other people, really. If I just stay out of the way and focus on what I can do for the next person who's put in front of me, my peace and serenity is there. My mind slows down, and I can sleep.
Well, how do you determine or gauge the quality of your sobriety in AA?
Peace and serenity. I remember when I came in, I remember what it was like when I came in. I just really wanted to stop drinking. I could not stop drinking. If I don't think about drinking and I'm not thinking about alcohol, I must be working a program. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
How do you determine or gauge the quality of your sobriety?
The quality of my sobriety goes right back to that 84. Love and tolerance of others is our code. If I am loving and tolerant of people, I've got my program together. If I'm restless, irritable, discontent, I got to write some stuff down. I got to get real. I got to get honest with myself, my higher power, my sponsor, sponsees, people in the rooms. It doesn't matter. I need to work it out with somebody else. But if I'm loving and tolerant of people and finding patience in abundance, I'm on that beam.
Why do you think alcoholics relapse?
Oh. We get lost in self. We get so lost in self. We get so lost in ego. We lose the humility that we had when we came into that room. We lose that reliance on our higher power. We lose that reliance on our fellow alcoholics. That's why alcoholics go back out. I mean, I know that if I go back to drinking, it will be because of my own pride. That will be my demise. I mean, it talks about it in 61 through 63. It talks about selfishness, self-centeredness. That is the root of our troubles. That is it. And sometimes there's no way of getting out of it without God's aid, you know. So if that's the root of my troubles, and now in where we are, we're in 2019, where we've got these cellular devices, we can instant gratification for any number of things and fill ourselves with these things. That's the change, I think, between the program when it first came along and now, is we've got so many different avenues to fill self without God. And I think we get distracted. We get distracted with filling self, and we forget about God. And then we drink.
Are you willing and able to sponsor other members currently?
Always. I never raise my hand at the meetings if it's a meeting where they ask that question. But I do H&I work. Everybody I talk to in the county jail, they all know that if they're serious about a program, that I'm there. Word of mouth. It's a funny thing. God puts people in my path. When they need it, when I need it, they're just there. It just happens. I've pretty much all the time have somebody I'm working through our first 164 pages with. And that's just it. Yeah.
Presently, what is the most important activity in your recovery program?
I can't say any one activity. I guess starting the day, because that's really what it begins with. I can easily wake up and look at my wife as an object, jump on my cell phone and start checking bank accounts, get into this consumerism thought pattern, and it just continues through the day. It's just like that's where it starts. But if I jump up out of bed, I'm grateful for my whole family as a whole, and I get into some connection with my higher power, it's a damn good start for the day. So I guess it's my morning routine is the most vital part of it. Yeah.
Would you please generally describe the purpose of the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous?
Group cohesiveness. Laws without laws, I guess we could say. I haven't spent a lot of time studying the traditions. I'm 5 years into sobriety, and I haven't spent a lot of time with that. I've had a couple service positions, but I've never done any state or county or nationwide anything with Alcoholics Anonymous. If God puts that in front of me, then that'll be what it'll be. But my understanding of it right now is just the cohesiveness of us working together is the purpose of the traditions.
Can you give us some examples of meeting etiquette?
No, I don't like that. Meeting etiquette. I have a hard time telling a sick person how to not be sick. And if I do have this, oh man, I don't like doing that. I don't. I think that if somebody comes in drunk and belligerent, that's my brother. I need to love them. I don't need to tell him what not to do and lay down the laws and regulations. There's plenty of other people to do that. Yeah, let's look at that.
All right, what role models do you have in sobriety?
Oh, I'm not going to use names. That's just silly. The role model, when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was jittery, I was shaky, I couldn't stop my thoughts, I was confused, and I was scared. And I remember there was a man in that West Slope Fellowship. He's got a lot of years at this point in time, but he was so calm. He would sit there and he wouldn't fidget. He was just exuded peace. And my God, that's what I wanted so bad. I wanted that peace so bad, that serenity that he just had. It was just like unflappable, unfazable. If the building caught on fire, he'd slowly saunter to the door, I swear to God. But that's what I wanted. And I found that in a lot of people. I found in early sobriety, I heard people talk about our basic text and the excitement that they had from it, and their ability to recite it was something that was very attractive to me. I knew I needed to incorporate that. The spiritual aspect that these people just freely talked about God that wasn't any God that I'd been exposed to as a child. And it was like, that was intriguing too. And the men and women in those rooms who talked about those things and just showed me those things in their life, that was what attracted me. And there were so many people. Really, to name specific people who were important to me wouldn't be fair to everybody else in the rooms.
What advice do you have for newcomers in AA?
Get phone numbers. Text people. I remember that was one of my things. It was like I would just keep in contact with other alcoholics. The 90 meetings in 90 days is a really good strategy too, and not for the reasons that some people think. 90 meetings in 90 days, you are giving yourself the optimal opportunity to meet like-minded people to find those people like I was just describing. You'll be able to find those kind of people who can work you through this program, who've got what you want. And if you're going to 90 meetings in 90 days, you're going to find a sponsor. You're going to get 8, 10, 12 guys' phone numbers or gals' phone numbers that you're going to be able to build your network with. And you're going to get those things. So I guess it's the 90 meetings in 90 days doing something. The focus of it. I mean, it's our intent. What is our intent behind doing whatever we do? If it's just to go there and get a little spiritual bump in the middle of the day, I guess that's okay for some people. But for a real alcoholic who needs to have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous to overcome this obsession to drink, use those 90 meetings to find the people that you're going to build a network around.
And what advice do you have for old-timers in AA?
Stay humble.
Can you please describe what this experience was like?
It was different. It was very different. It was there were 2 or 3 of those questions there that I'm going to really go back and look at. Exact nature of our defects. What is the exact nature of our wrongs? I'm going to go back and I'm going to re-examine that. I'm probably going to sit the next few days and think about that. But again, I mean, that's the general nature of things. If I keep my mind open and I stay humble and I pull in all these new things that God puts in front of me and have a spiritual experience through them, it's all good things. Thanks. This was really cool.
From the old preamble, I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a Big Book, it's time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it, loan it, scatter it, and then learn from it what it means to be an AA.